Hello, and welcome to my final episode on The French Dispatch. If you haven't seen the previous episodes, go ahead and start the playlist over. Start from episode 1, 2, 3, and so on, because I think it's important, like I said in my previous videos, to get the full context around this conversation about this particular movie. Anyway, if you haven't seen those, go check them out. And if you have seen them, welcome back, and thank you for sticking with this. In today's episode, we're going to discuss the private dining room of the police commissioner. And I'm also going to conclude with my thoughts about the film in its entirety, because I think this particular story does a really good job of being the heart of this film as a whole. Now, let's begin. The private dining room of the police commissioner. As we saw in the first episode where we discussed the cycling tour of ennui, we saw ultimately the fate that people experience when they grow up in ennui. Right? There's a life cycle to this place. And it starts with sort of the restrictions that are placed upon the youth, the expression that comes from oppression, and the effects that oppression can have on a person. And then as they grow, as they become older, as they reach more formative years, like the students of ennui, they become rebellious, they become revolutionary, they become forceful about their thoughts and their ideas. And then I think ultimately where this story is landing is a little bit about the attempt and ultimate failure of adults to make meaningful change last. One might be able to escape their past, escape who they were as a child, escape their upbringing, but ultimately that can be anticlimactic and sometimes lead to a worse, if not no better situation than the situation that you come from. And ultimately, I think that's where the private dining room of the police commissioner lands as a story, the theme that it tells on its own. The story begins with writer Roebuck Wright, played by Jeffrey Wright, who is interviewing on a talk show about a night that he spent in ennui, where he was invited to have dinner with the ennui police chief. The meal itself was prepared by a legendary police chef known as Lieutenant Nescaffier. The dinner is interrupted, however, when the commissioner's son is abducted and taken to ransom by a group of criminals led by a character named Chauffeur, or the Chauffeur. Like all the other tales in this short story, these criminals represent kind of the people that we see at the beginning in the cycling tour, specifically the criminals that reside in the pickpocket alleyway. Anyway, they abduct the police's chief's son in order to negotiate the release of Albert, an underground accountant nicknamed the Abacus. After a big epic shootout, the police chief's son Gigi requests that they send in the cook, Lieutenant Nescaffier, to prepare a meal. The crooks consent to this demand, and the authorities dispatch Nescaffier, who prepares a poisonous dish that everybody except for Gigi and the chauffeur consume. The criminals all succumb to a poison, and then there's this really kind of eclectic car chase that happens, but ultimately they rescue the kid and they save the day. After everything is said and done, Nescaffier tells Wright that the poison tasted like nothing he's ever eaten before, and they begin to talk about what it's like to be strangers in a strange land, because they're both immigrants who came to ennui in pursuit of a better life than the life that they had back home.
Seeking something missing. Missing something left behind.
Seeking something missing something left behind. This quote right here, to me, is everything, not just about this short story, but about this movie. What this depicts is the feeling that they both share. Wright is a black homosexual, unwelcome in the pre-civil rights era of American history. I don't know too much about Nescaffier himself, but it is clear that he had a harder life before he came to France, presumably having to do with ongoing military conflicts of some kind in his nondescript homeland. Both share a common experience, coming to a new place with the idea of becoming greater than you are and ultimately losing a piece of yourself in the process. Both are foreigners in a strange land who wanted to find something better, but what they found was a different set of problems. They wanted a better life, they got it, but they left something behind when they did. For Nescaffier, we can only imagine, but when it comes to Wright, I think we have a bit more of our historical context to lean on to help us figure out kind of what it is that he potentially left behind. And what you see when he came to France, in one of the flashbacks within the flashbacks, is this scene where he finds that he was just unwelcome in France as he was in America. At least in America, he had a profession, he was well respected, but here in France, here in ennui, he's kind of a nobody. He can be thrown into the cell just like anybody else. And so what he found was no better than what he truly left behind. Only this time, he doesn't even really have an identity to lean on. He's taken on a new problem. He's taken on the problem of also being a foreigner, which makes him more alienated here in France than he was even in his unwelcome homeland of America. It's in this following conversation with Howitzer where Wright decides that he wants to leave the dialogue about this conversation out of his article, but Howitzer believes that this is essential to the work. He feels like it's the heart of the piece, and I agree with Howitzer. It's not only the heart of the piece, it's also the heart of this film as a whole. And I think that's a good segue into my conclusion, and ultimately why I feel like The French Dispatch matters. In this film, the writers are given complete liberty to make a piece that they find meaningful, and in every plot line, the writer plays an active role in the story. They're not an objective observer, but part of the story that unfolds. Arthur's only rule for his writers is this: try to make it sound like you wrote it that way on purpose. In other words, he's telling his writers that contrary to the idea of journalistic integrity, it's not the subject matter, but the perspective of the observer that gives art authentic meaning. Anderson in all of his films strives for this sense of like deliberate artistry, right? Half the story is an observation of the goings on in Ennui sur Blasé, but the other half of the story is the story of the writers themselves. It's really seen through the eyes of artists who infuse their own experiences that create the meaning in the observations that they take in. The writers synthesize the world around them at their leisure and then apply their own spin to create something romantic or melancholic or meditative about the human condition. There's no journalistic integrity in that, and therein lies the beauty of it. That's what makes the reporting more than just an article, but a work of art in and of itself. The world may be objectively one thing, but it's the artist's perspective during the act of observation that imbues the thing that happens with meaning. This harkens back, I think, to this idea that like journalism and really anything that has some sort of discipline in this world has rules to it, and to break the rules, an artist first has to understand them. Howitzer knows that his writers understand the rules, right? And so it's because he knows that they know the rules that he completely trusts them to break the rules and defends everything down to their last grammatical error to protect the integrity of what they're trying to do and how they're trying to say it, knowing that authenticity is what exists in the details and what exists between the lines. He goes out of his way to ensure that his writers have everything that they need to produce the exact style of writing that is uniquely theirs, which is what makes The French Dispatch so special in this fictional world. Howitzer values authenticity above all else, not in the factual sense, but in the sense that the artist's experience is what is real. There's no objectivity in journalism. To strive for that is stupid. It strips the world of all meaning, and embracing the imperfections and the role of the writer enables his paper to thrive by syndicating curated works of journalistic art. Through this simple decree, Howitzer and possibly Anderson himself is saying that it's not the art that's important, but the artists themselves and those who consume it. Those are the people who matter, the humans behind the story. And it's through the perspectives of others who are not us, who are flawed, yes, but ultimately living their own truths, that we grow and that we learn about the world. To understand another culture, we must first understand the baggage that we bring with us and how that shapes our experiences. And that's why this story is told through the perspective of expats and introduces us to the world through the lens of American journalists living in France. They are all people who break the rules in life, whether it's sleeping with your subject or not abiding by the social norms of your society. All of these people are a ragtag motley crew of people who have very unique perspectives and bring that to Liberty, Kansas. I think what Anderson's saying, and Anderson of all people who is an expat himself living in France, what he's saying is that it's not the places that you go or the things that you see in this life that matter, but what matters is the story that you have to tell and the story of other people, as long as you choose to continue to listen to them and as long as you continue to learn and to grow, not from experiences, but from people who have experiences worth sharing. That's what matters. And that's why The French Dispatch matters. All right, thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Media Matters. Like I said, this is a larger part of a larger series, so hopefully you watched all of the other episodes before getting to this one. I might cut them all together in one big video. So yeah, anyways, thank you. If you enjoyed this, please consider liking and subscribing and hitting that notification bell so that you see every time I upload a new video. I also met Cameron Monaghan at Disneyland, which like we're boys now. It was so crazy. We had this whole conversation. I went up to him and was like, "Hey, yo, Cam, like, let me get a selfie selfie? And he was like, sure. It's classic Cam, dude. Classic Cam, bro. We're boys now for life, dude. You can't, like, relationships like that, you gotta keep them close. You gotta keep those types of people close in your life, you know what I'm saying? Cam, shout out, bro. Love you. Anyway, all that to say, I might do an episode of Shameless. But also, there's a lot of requests in the comments, and I'm trying to figure out which ones to bring to the top. I know a lot of people have requested Skins, which is like the British version of Shameless. So maybe I'll do a combo episode. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to see a combo episode on Shameless and Skins. I think that would be cool. Anyway, thanks, and I will see you in the next one.